Oseo.
오세요.
That's a Cherokee greeting. And wave the great feather. This is the instrument for making the good. There. Starting right off with to say, in spite of the culture side, our ancient ancestress of this turtle island failed to be impressed by the presence of the church and its ministers. She is still with us in her vulnerary love, and the ancient lifeways have planted seeds and spores of their own. So today I'm starting off with this Navajo story. It's a Navajo story about the owl and the ant. So I'm going to say a bit about the owl. The owl seems to have fallen into a disrepute, considered, a bad omen and things like that. Somehow that came in somewhere along the line, I don't know. But in the ancient world that here we are still speaking of, the owl is not negative, is not a portent. There was a book, and I think a film made of it, of a minister that was with the First Nations far up north, and it was called The Owl Called My Name. Sort of that is an announcement of his eventual demise. So, what it really is that the owl, long, long, long ago, is the guide when people are expiring from this life into Shinar or the ancient land. So the owl was really a guide. And that's pretty much what features in this Navajo story that I'm about to talk about. And the language that I used in this, I have come to use in this, is Gaelic. There's a connection between the Navajo, both in lore and in language, to the ancient Celts and the Gaelic language. So in this, it was convenient for me to use the Gaelic language. So to start off with, old grandmother and old grandfather, is shin shin shinar and shin shin shimar. That's what that would be. And there's a little ant in here, and the little ant is Shinnig. Shinnig is the little ant. And where it's being featured is the womb tower of the ancient land. So if you can go up here, you can see that ancient tower of the ancient land, and that's in Gaelic. Shinan Morach Tur an Shinar. So that's what that is saying. And this whole locale where this story is going to be taking place in the Gaelic, An Lara Conrov Avas Dosin Shinar, means the site on which stood our great grandmother's abode. So, and the owl itself, in a Gaelic, Coyote, means the night veil. So you get some idea there in this story. And that this actually has a locale. And this locale is there in Nevada. And in Nevada, adjacent to the very large Pyramid Lake, is what is now a dry lake. But it is also this site of our ancient grandmother's abode. And it's called Winnemucca. And Winnemucca has this very, very significant site. And here, you can just look here, that this is the very place. And the owls, who will be featured in this story here, they live in the cave underneath the big rock. It's exactly what the story says. And both of these are across from each other and are related to each other in this ancient place, in this ancient myth. So now we start out with the two owls who live underneath, in the cave underneath the big rock. So old man owl, he is saying to old woman owl, he said, I'm going to go hunting. And where I'm going to go hunting is down that place where the hill looks like an ant hill. So that's where I'll be going. And so he flies down to this place where the hill looks like an ant hill. It's really an ancient cinder cone about 60 miles south of this very site. The real name in the myth is actually the Succulent Hill, the Hill of Succulents, which also means the womb. There, an ancient name for the womb. So there, old man owl, he is down there, and he's hearing the crying of a baby. Wah, wah. So he looks around, and he finds there a hole, like a rabbit burrow, like that. And he sees that's where this crying is coming from. So he's reaching around there inside, like that. He gets a hold of the little guy there, and he starts to tug him until he pops out, like that. And he lays him on the ground there. And he said, well, whose child are you anyway? That's how he gets started. He said, well, I'm going to take you home to old woman owl and see what she can do with you. So he picks up the little guy. He says, Shinnik is what he is. And he flies him on down back to their home, the cave underneath the big rock. And he takes him in there and shows him to old grandmother owl. And she said, look at that, where did you get this little guy anyway? And what are we going to do with him anyway? And he said, well, I'm figuring that you're going to take care of him and see what comes about with it. So that's the way they get started there. And so once he's there in this home of the two owls, they make a little clothing for him out of some rabbit fur. And old man owl, he makes a little bow and arrow for him, like that, and starts teaching him, what to do, how to get along with the little guy. He's crawling around, so how the baby's going, but he's kind of growing pretty quickly. Doesn't take a long time, like that. And in the meantime, the owls always had there in their cave, they had a pot that was always cooking, a little fire. So you can kind of look down here. There you see the two owls, and here this pot is cooking on the fire. So whenever old man owl he's out hunting and he catch something, any little thing, he'd come back and he would throw it there into that pot. The old people did manage to have this kind of things that were ever cooking. It wasn't really a good idea health-wise, but that's the story of what they used to do. So come back to me for a minute. So that's how it was going on. The little guy, he's kind of growing, he's learning how to shoot his little bow and arrow, flexing his own muscles and like that. The old man hunting and bringing things back and throwing it in the ever-cooking pot, like that. So it was just fine. Then one day, the old man owl had caught a snake, and he put that snake into that pot and go back down there, like that. And there, that snake was now in that cooking pot. And the old man left. And what happened is that little Shinnig, he came up there and he wondered what was cooking, and he sort of dipped his finger in there and licked his finger. So he come back here. When he licked his finger like that, when he did, his eyes, they opened. They opened up like that. Now the old man owl, and he came back in and he looked at that and he saw that little Shinnig's eyes were wide open like that. And he said, oh, you have tasted the brew of the snake. So it's time for me to take you back to where I found you. He said, he's come of term by now. So old man owl picks up this Shinnig and flies back down to the hill that looks like an ant hill, like that. And he laid him down there like that. And then he's telling that little Shinnig, he said, this is where I found you. He said, but somewhere there exists your mother. Somewhere there exists your father. Somewhere there exists your aunt. Somewhere there exists your uncle. And what you do with it is your own affair. And he left me there, wondering, what did he mean by that? That somewhere there exists my mother, somewhere there exists my father, somewhere there exists my aunt, and somewhere exists my uncle. And he said, what I'm going to do about it's going to be my own affair. And he flew off, leaving me here. And by that time I was tired and I laid down to sleep. So that's the end of that part of the story. The story has further episodes, but this is the part that I'm illustrating right now. So it's long been held here in Native America that the ants, or more or less, are progeny or ancestors and so forth. You go to some of this Anasazi ruins, you'll see the ants there, and that is the old Pueblo people. They haven't given up their Pueblos. So that's really part of what this story is saying here about all of this. And to realize that this all belongs to an ancient worldview that belongs to what we call the Great Mother or the matriarchy, and where this story, this idea of the story, fits in to where we are right now. Between the end of October, called Samhain in Gaelic, and the winter solstice, this is a kind of a timeless time. We have to see in this old way that what is the winter solstice is really the moment of conception, when we are actually conceived in her. And our life here, the way that we live our life, the way we conduct our life, we are kind of like a fetus. We're growing in her. So we want to live the good life. We want to know the good red road and like that, so that we're getting right until the term, the 10 months has passed there by the time of end of October. Now we are born. Now we are born from this term into her that I call blackness is her body, and that this is the way that our life that she has conceived now nourishes her, and that's how that she continues and continues in this way. So that's how we can see this worldview. Now, for a moment, this cave, let me tell you, let me go over here, this cave, I should say what I have here is when Vivian and I first came to this cave many years ago, there was, right here at the entrance to that cave, was a very large, silvery, great horned owl sitting there. And that opened up this whole story to me. Inside the cave, you step down in it. It's not a deep cave, it's more like a deep cave. And the shape of it is like a longboat. And longboats were also, used for burials. And so this has that in there. And in there, the archaeologists in very modern times did unearth a child. A child was buried in there, and many baskets were also in there. Now, come over here to this illustration here. On the walls of the cave, I think there's about half a dozen figures like this, placed all along on both sides of the cave. And these are birth signs. These have been recorded also in the Gambudist books of Eastern Europe. So we do have that this is a giving birth posture, a symbol for that. And it would, be with, the child that was interred in there, so that there is a continuous life going on in there. So that's very significant there. And I should also say, with all of this antiquity of the owls, about way more than 60 miles, 50, 60 miles east of here is another place called Stillwater. And that place also features what has become known as the Spirit Cave. And in that Spirit Cave, in the 1940s, a body, a mummified body, was found by archaeologists there. And its burial and so forth were in an envelope, woven envelope there. And this turned out to be 10,000 years old. And this wasn't realized until recently. And all the government, tried to black it out. The archaeologists, some went off the deep end. All kind of things happened when this was discovered. It was discovered but not fully realized until very, very recent times. Everybody got upset about it because somehow that wasn't supposed to be here, or people weren't supposed to be here. And then I'm saying along with that, if you look up here, with that interred body was this. I've replicated this out of cardboard, and I've seen the original that's in Carson City in the museum there, and it's made out of wood. It's been carved out of wood, and everybody accepts that it's an owl, and it is stripes like this, and on the back horizontal stripes, and I've added an owl feather to it. This very same thing also has appeared in ancient Eastern Mediterranean. And so here was this owl accompanying the Spirit Cave Man, as he has come to be called. I've been in that very cave itself and so forth. So all of this, has this kind of relevance. This feature here does, if you're kind of looking at it from a distance, does look like it's some big sort of snake-looking creature coming down the hill. It's all on a hill, and right down here, underneath of it, there is what I call and feel as an altar that has a vulva form in it, and surrounded are whatever the inscriptions are, or symbols around it, is right underneath here. And that's, one part of it. And here on the other side, this would be also, the ancient place of our mother's abode. I've called it the temple. And it is full of inscriptions that coincide with inscriptions in Eastern Europe that a Buddhist has seen photographs of. So that's what I'm calling it, So this is the cave, and this is the temple, and so forth. Now, I want you to look over there, because this is a rendering. I put it together, and I created this. And so the owl is a hunter. And here I put, this kind of a bow with the rabbit skins on it, and the owl, to say the owl is a hunter. And then you can come down here. I have here, this is a shinnig. A shinnig is, figured, as a fishmeyer ant, little ant. And my illustration here are actually red ants. And the red ants, I do another piece called the Red Ant Chantway, but that is to show you some ants, some ant people. We should call them that there. And then we can come over here and look at this piece here. This piece, I would say, is maybe, somewhere 1,000 years old or 1,500 years old maybe. I was a graduate art student in Mexico, and I was in Yucatan. And in recent times, there's a Coyote there that's a cistern well kind of thing. Chichen Itza gets its name from that, sort of the cistern well of the Itza. And when it was dredged, what they found were a lot of artifacts that people had made offerings. Had one way or another, ceremonially, or maybe just people on their own, cast things in there and maybe said a prayer or something. It was figured, auspicious to do it. And that's where this comes from. Somebody had fished this out and approached me with it. And it is a owl female. She has a vulva and the breast and everything, and she is in an owl form. What's also interesting is that the Mayans did not know metallurgy. A few places in, quote, the New World did have metallurgy long ago, and this would ostensibly come from someplace in Central America. I'd like to think Honduras, because Honduras has just elected its first woman president. And so that's very interesting that maybe it's made out of brass. So, and then here's another authentic artifact. This is called a platform pipe, and it's a beautifully carved feature of an owl on it. And this is from the cultures called by the modern names Adena or Hopewell, between 2,000 and 2,500 years ago. It's rare. Reportedly, there's only about 200 of them that are known. Most of those are broken. So it's a very short pipe. Here, the mouthpiece is here, and the bowl is on top of the carving of the owl. So I'd like to show you that that has been part of Native America all along. And here, my chief owl here is from Mexico, definitely a wonderful folk carving piece. And then alongside of that, I found this piece over there in Arizona of an owl man. Now you don't see too many. You see eagle man and you see buffalo man, even coyote man, but you don't usually come across an owl man. So that's what's just really unique in portraying that way. Now, to touch on just another thing, Turtle Island, our name ubiquitously for Native America, has come from the Iroquois. It's a kind of a story that's in the Iroquois, and we've kind of just taken it in as, you know, very good name for this place. But Turtle Island does have a secret name, and this secret name is Masnid, literally raised nest, raised nests. In the Lakota, Yawanka is ho-ho-pig, meaning raised up. A kind of the idea in Latin of altar, altus, you know, nidus would be similar to that. That's the sacred name of this, because people, wherever they came from, or whenever they came, or why ever they came here, they found refuge here in this place, in this sacred place of her, in which it was until the 16th century Europeans began their incursion into Native America and rolled out a carpet of their own ideas and ideology. But nevertheless, here she is. Let me portray this down here. You can see this is a very good portrayal of her sacred nest, Masnid. Now while you're looking at that, in India, and the language, you know, Sanskrit we call it, the Sanskrit womb is Garbha, and Garbha would mean hidden womb. And then you say Hiran Garbha, you mean the golden veil that is covering her hidden womb. So that has to do with the bees that are on this. This is a woven piece, and the bees there, and the significance, we'll say, of honey, madhu. Madhu means nourishment. So the whole idea that one, her womb is nourishing, and so forth. And along with this idea, you can kind of see the idea of a cave or an enclosure. You come over and look at this image here. Now I've replicated this very accurately. This is a petroglyph. It's located in Oregon. And what it really depicts very accurately, you're seeing her as an owl, and she is ensconced here in her home, her womb, and so forth. So that is very good, very illustrates very good that. So in terms of that and the depiction, then I can say, as you see, she is ensconced, within her womb, within her cave, within her nest, anything to that. The language actually has it more included. She is included in the darkness. She's included in what is hidden. She's part and parcel of that. And so openings in the earth, nooks, crannies, holes, are all figured in that way by Native Americans. And so, whether somebody wants to put a pebble in there or make an offering, there's all kinds of relations to these openings to the earth. And here, this depiction is very accurate that way. And back down here here's the two owls and this cooking pot I figure here. This is actually a little Navajo pot. And it's kind of a reminder for me because when I was in Arizona, there was a Navajo woman alongside a road somewhere where we were, and she had her pottery out for sale for anybody to stop by. And I bought that little Navajo pot from her. And subsequently I learned a lot about Navajo pottery and who made it and so forth. So, and I have a little snake in there to signify that. Now I'm going to finish with a Mary Oliver poem. So Mary Oliver's book's called Devotions here, and it's really wonderful how many of her poems really do accompany my themes. And I've really, really enjoyed reading her. I've enjoyed knowing her in this way. And she continues right here in this poem. It is called The Little Owl Who Lives in the Orchard. Now I like the idea because going with the ant, the shenek, of the littleness in this place. Even though I told you the great horned owl, a very great horned owl, introduced us, to the cave underneath the big rock. But here, this is the little owl who lives in the orchard. His beak could open a bottle, and his eyes, when he lifts their soft lids, go on reading something just beyond your shoulder. Blake, maybe, or the book of Revelations. Never mind that he eats only the black smocked crickets and dragonflies if they happen to be out late over the ponds, and of course the occasional festal mouse. Never mind that he is only a memo from the offices of fear. It's not size but surge that tells us when we are in touch with something real. And when I hear him in the orchard fluttering down the little aluminum ladder of his scream, when I see his wings open like two black ferns, a flurry of palpitations as cold as sleep rackets across the marshlands of my heart like a wild spring day. Somewhere in the universe, in the gallery of important things, the babyish owl, ruffled and rakish, sits on its pedestal. Dear dark dapple of plush, a message reads the label from that mysterious conglomerate, Oblivion and Company. The hooked head stares from the blouse of dark feathery lace. It could be a valentine.